BBC pauses its investigation into a presenter at the request of the police. Director General Tim Davie said officers would continue inquiries into allegations that an unnamed star paid a teenager for explicit images. The Prime Minister says he is confident claims will be properly looked into.
I think it's important that the BBC conducts this investigation quickly and rigorously, given the concerning and serious nature of the allegations.
Also, this lunchtime, mortgage rates hit a 15-year high. But what more can be done to help struggling homeowners? Lenders are quizzed by MPs. Flooding, power cuts and collapsed ceilings. An ITV News investigation reveals the shocking levels of disrepair at England's NHS hospitals. And on the road to recovery, Madonna speaks out for the first time since battling an infection, but confirms to some of her fans the tour is on hold.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. The BBC says it's paused its internal investigation into allegations that a staff presenter paid a teenager for explicit images. In a statement, the corporation said it was asked to do so by police while they scope future work. The BBC Director General Tim Davie faced questions from the press today at the corporation's annual briefing and confirmed that while an initial complaint received in May was very serious, there was no evidence of any criminality. The unnamed male presenter was suspended last week following claims in the Sun newspaper. Last night, the young person at the centre of the row said nothing inappropriate or unlawful happened. Their mother, though, sticks by the allegations. Well, the Prime Minister says he is assured it will be investigated swiftly. With the latest, here's Lucy Watson.
Outside the BBC, the media gather and the organisation's staff are mithered.
What's the story? What's going on?
Inside, those at the helm are finally speaking out.
It was clearly serious allegations, because they were serious because we gave them to the corporate investigations team decided to push forward and investigate the case.
Because interest simply isn't waning in this story. The fury around the BBC and its unnamed presenter, alleged to have paid thousands of pounds for sexually explicit photographs of a teenager. Even the Prime Minister has been forced to respond to the crisis in Lithuania this morning.
Obviously, they're very serious and concerning allegations, and that's why I'm pleased that the Culture Secretary spoke to the Director General of the BBC over the weekend and is confident that the BBC is investigating this both rigorously and rapidly. I think that's the right course of action.
For 4 days, the attention has shifted to and fro from the Sun newspaper to the BBC, from the complainant to the alleged victim. Today, the corporation released its account of events. In mid-May, the BBC was made aware of a complaint about one of its presenters. But not until 7 weeks later did they hold their first conversations with him. The next day, The Sun published claims from the family of a 20-year-old that the star had paid for photographs of their child when they were 17. Over the weekend, the BBC confirmed it had suspended the presenter, who is still unnamed. And yesterday, the Metropolitan Police requested the organisation pause their internal investigation. The Met has since confirmed to ITV News that it has not started a formal investigation. Their inquiries continue, but there is criticism for how this controversy has been handled by the BBC.
I think that the BBC could have on Saturday got an injunction preventing the naming or speculation of any presenter, because the individual who would have been correctly identified was entitled to privacy. The other presenters who were wrongly named were also entitled to privacy and would also otherwise have been liable. And I think in retrospect, they'll make that lesson learned.
This is a scandal that is lingering, a damaging stalemate for both reputation and credibility for all parties. Lucy Watson, ITV News.
Our correspondent Rebecca Barry watched the briefing and asked a question. Rebecca.
Well, today the BBC would have liked to have been talking about its record sales and profits in its annual report published today. Instead, the BBC is consumed by this crisis. At a press briefing earlier and a short time ago on Radio 4, the Director General, Tim Davie, has been fielding non-stop questions about these allegations. There are a few details that stand out for me. First of all, that the police have asked the BBC to pause their investigation while they presumably assess whether there is any criminal case to answer here. Next, that the initial complaint made in May was assessed as serious but not criminal, and that the investigations team then sought to verify the allegations. The BBC made 2 attempts to contact the complainant by both phone and email, and Tim Davie pointed out that it was right for them to assess what they were dealing with before contacting the presenter. The Sun then contacted the BBC last week. At that point, the allegations did include criminal allegations, and that's the point that the BBC presenter was first spoken to, 7 weeks on from the initial complaint. Tim Davie also revealed that he's asked for a review into how complaints are red flagged. He said there were fair questions to be asked about that process. Now, trust is at the foundation of the BBC, and I asked Tim Davie why licence fee payers should still trust the BBC after this crisis. He said it was too early to say how this would impact the BBC in terms of its reputation and trust, but he insisted that he and the senior team were committed to navigating this serious situation with care and diligence. He said that he has faith that people will see the BBC as precious and doing the right thing.
All right, Rebecca at New Broadcasting House, thank you. Next, there's more misery for people looking to get on the property ladder as it emerged. The average 2-year fixed mortgage deal is up to 6.66%. That is the highest since the credit crunch in August 2008. Today, lenders appeared before MPs to answer questions on how interest rates are impacting the housing market. Our political correspondent Shihab Khan reports.
Month after month, interest rates have risen and mortgage repayments have gone up. Staff at this fence manufacturing company in Derbyshire are feeling the squeeze as their monthly budgets take hits from every direction.
It's not just the mortgages what are going up, it's everything else on top, with the energy bills, so you've just got more outgoings than incoming at the moment in time.
Mortgage costs have now hit their highest level in 15 years. And the rate on a 2-year fixed deal has now overtaken the peak that was reached during Liz Truss's time in office. In February 2022, if you had a 2-year fixed rate mortgage worth £200,000, your repayments would have been £891. The latest increase means the payment on the same mortgage is now almost £500 more at £1,371. Raised monthly payments are also impacting potential house buyers. Today, the biggest mortgage lenders in the country were quizzed in Parliament, revealing that many looking to buy are being more cautious in their decisions.
Customers' general bills are higher, food and fuel, etc. It means that customers, for their maximum borrowing, is less than what it was a year ago or 18 months ago. So clearly that's going to constrain customers' choices and what properties they can afford. We can see some signs where customers are either putting more deposit down or looking for a smaller property.
But the experts are warning that we potentially haven't seen the worst of it.
Well, I think the Bank of England, with the Monetary Policy Committee, is likely to continue increasing interest rates until it sees evidence of a downturn in wage growth.
But ministers remain adamant that tackling inflation is the best strategy.
Well, we want to see mortgage rates going down, but the way that we're going to do that is through bearing down on inflation. What we've got to do is be fiscally responsible. We've got to do things that are funded, and we've got to bear down on inflation and halve it by the end of this year, as the Prime Minister has set out.
For those at home sitting on mortgages, today's news will undoubtedly be a huge concern as they plan for the future.
Well, let's talk to Shihab now, who's in Westminster. And Shihab, new data on wages also this morning. What does it mean for the economy?
Well, the latest data says that on average, wages have gone up by 7.3% in the 3 months till May. That is a record increase. On the face of it, that sounds amazing, but there are loads of caveats here. The first one is that inflation is still incredibly high. It's even higher than that wage increase. It's at 8.7%. But there are also fears from the Bank of England and the government that this could result in higher inflation. Essentially how it works is because companies are paying people more, what they tend to do is they end up increasing prices of their goods. As those prices of goods go up, people then demand higher wages, and that results in something called a wage price spiral, which ultimately leads to increased inflation. Ultimately, looking at the latest data, that doesn't seem to be the case because the most recent months looks like it is beginning to slow down, but it's something that's worth keeping an eye on for the future.
All right, Shihab, thank you. Now, there are questions this lunchtime on how a convicted criminal was allowed to go on a 90-minute rampage through Birmingham city centre, killing one person and injuring 7 others. An NHS report published today into Zephaniah McLeod has criticised how mental health services failed to treat him while he was in prison. Community mental health services didn't even know he'd been released. Well, Ben Chapman is in the city for us this lunchtime. And Ben, the details of this report, really shocking.
Yes, and described by the victims' families as astonishing and incomprehensible. It was here on a busy night in Birmingham city centre nearly 3 years ago that Zephaniah McLeod stabbed 8 people with a knife in a random series of attacks. He was a paranoid schizophrenic with a long history of violence who'd only been released from prison 5 months earlier. And today's report outlines the catalogue of failures to manage his mental health. It says he wasn't appropriately treated or medicated over many years in prison. There was poor communication and collaboration between the many agencies involved, and he was then released without supervision and without community mental health services here in Birmingham even being told. Now, Jacob Billington was killed by McLeod that night. His mother says she's shocked by the findings of today's report and believes her son might be alive today if things had been done properly.
I think nothing prepared me for the sheer scale of failings in our report, the sheer length of time this man was known to different authorities. I am angry about the sort of tick box nature of the way he was handled, and it makes me worry about the safety of this system for other people.
Well, the report makes 5 recommendations which the agencies concerned have accepted, but it also makes wider criticisms about the standard of mental health care and the support available to prisoners when they're released. Now, Jo Billington, who you heard there, believes that the report's recommendations are weak. She says the findings are very familiar, and she says she has very little confidence that this cannot happen again.
OK, Ben, in Birmingham, thank you. As NATO leaders gather in Lithuania this lunchtime, Ukraine's president said it would be absurd that his country is not offered NATO membership. Volodymyr Zelensky described the uncertainty as a sign of weakness. Our Europe editor is in the capital, Vilnius. James.
Yeah, a very strong message from President Zelensky, who is on his way here. Will have dinner with NATO leaders tonight. He is worried that NATO's invitation to Ukraine won't be as firm as he'd like it to be. He's worried that NATO leaders are going to end up using it as a bargaining chip in a future peace negotiations rather than just giving Ukraine firm membership. He said it seems there is no readiness to invite Ukraine to NATO nor to make it a member of the alliance. Now, the leaders are discussing all that at the moment. President Biden, who's here, is very keen that there is some unity on this issue, and this is what he said before the talk started.
We agree on the language that you proposed relative to the future of Ukraine being able to join NATO. My American president heard me say many times, I still think that President Putin thinks the way he succeeds is to break NATO. I'm not going to do that, especially with you as leader. So thank you for willing to do it. Thank you.
Now, there may well be unity among the 30-plus members of the alliance here, but not necessarily with Ukraine as well. Now, Ukraine feels that it's done its share of the heavy lifting and heavy fighting, and Zelensky said it's about respect. Ukraine deserves respect, and that uncertainty, he said, is weakness. That's a very strong message he'll give to them over dinner tonight.
All right, James, at that NATO summit in Lithuania. Thank you. Still to come, The crumbling hospital buildings are adding to the stresses on NHS staff. And Madonna spotted out following a hospital scare, but she says the start of her tour is on hold. First, a teacher who was stabbed at a secondary school in Tewkesbury is recovering well from his injuries. The teacher was discharged from hospital last night. Pupils returned to the classroom this morning following the incident yesterday, but with extra police patrols in the area. Pablo Taylor is outside the school for us this lunchtime. And Pablo, what's the latest?
Well, teachers and students are both back here at Tewkesbury Academy, trying, you'd imagine, to get back to some sense of normality after yesterday's event. In the meantime, the victim, who's been named locally as 27-year-old Jamie Sampson, is said to be recovering well. He had been in a serious but stable condition, but was discharged from hospital last night. Well, as part of increased security measures, we've seen police officers on patrol outside the school here, and we've also seen a pop-up police van where we're told people can go in and talk to officers about their concerns. In the last couple of hours, we've also heard from the local MP here. He says he will be visiting the school over the next few days and is also keen to find out how security can be improved.
I will speak to the Home Secretary and the Education Secretary either today or over the next few days to really open the conversation, see if there are any extra measures need to be taken, you know, to really try and learn the lessons from what is an isolated incident. But if there are lessons to learn, let's start to learn them, let's start to have those conversations.
Well, as for the teenage boy involved in this attack, he is still being questioned by police after being arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. As for the rest of the students here, we're told that they will be offered a range of mental and emotional support. The school says the same support will be made available to the teachers. The school has thanked them for their professionalism over what has been a very difficult period.
All right, Pablo, thank you. Next, to the shocking state of disrepair in England's NHS hospitals, an ITV News investigation has revealed almost half have been forced to temporarily close departments and vital services. Flooding, leaks, collapsed ceilings. Some buildings are so structurally unsafe, entire wards have had to shut for good. Well, our investigations correspondent Daniel Hewitt joins me now. Daniel, you started investigating this a few months ago. It's really shocking.
Yeah, we did. Back in February, when we looked into this, we found sort of disrepair across dozens of NHS hospitals, and one consultant at the time said to me they just hope when the next leak comes, the next collapsed ceiling comes along, nothing catastrophic happens. What our investigation has now found is the impact that disrepair, those structural problems, are having on patient care, on the ability of very stretched services to try and treat patients. These are some of the numbers we found from our investigation. 42% of the NHS trusts we contacted who responded to our freedom of information requests had temporarily or permanently closed wards, departments or services. 171 incidents in total, we were told, across 27 NHS trusts. That number is likely to be higher, though, because many didn't respond to us. And our data shows the problem is getting worse. You look at 2020, 47, it goes up again in 2021. You can see there it goes up again in 2022. A couple of examples to pull out for you. At St George's Hospital in South London, the maternity ward flooded in 2020, so women in labour had to be taken by ambulance to other hospitals. West Middlesex Hospital as well, they had a power cut in 2022. These pictures you can see are actually from St Mary's Hospital in West London, who invited us in to show us the damage at their hospital. Real problems, disrepair at a very old building in desperate need of help. They've had to close 2 entire wards at this hospital, 1 permanently. This is what one of the consultants told us.
When a ward closes, that puts more pressure on our teams who are working in the emergency department, where repairs are going on, where water's coming through ceilings or windows, where we're having to shut beds because a space is no longer safe and we're having to get a repair in. It just makes it so hard and really demoralising for staff.
The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, told us they are committed to building, the government are committed to building 40 new hospitals by 2030. St Mary's, though, won't be one of them.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Finally, this lunchtime, Madonna has spoken for the first time since being admitted to intensive care with a serious bacterial infection. The star posted on social media saying she was on the road to recovery, but confirmed her celebration tour was, for some, on hold for now. Sally Biddulph has more.
Getting back into the groove, but slowly, and not striking a killer pose just yet. Madonna's world tour is being delayed till after the summer, so she can fully recover from a serious infection which landed her in intensive care a fortnight ago. Last night, in a statement to fans, she said, "Thank you for your positive energy, prayers and words of healing and encouragement. I have felt your love. I'm on the road to recovery and incredibly grateful for all the blessings in my life. My focus now is my health and getting stronger, and I assure you I'll be back with you as soon as I can. The current plan is to reschedule the North American leg of the tour and to begin in October in Europe." The statement came after the Queen of Pop was spotted in New York.
Guess who we saw out and about today, looking great.
Fans everywhere breathed a sigh of relief.
She very rarely is unwell or ill that we ever see, and she's such a pinnacle of fitness that it came as a real surprise, especially ahead of the tour, and it's such a grueling schedule and such a grueling looking show, no doubt. Like her other tours, it was a real surprise actually.
The first night of the celebration tour, a romp through her greatest hits, will now take place in London on October the 14th. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
Well, just time for a reminder of our main story. This lunchtime, the BBC says it has paused its internal investigation into allegations that a staff presenter paid a teenager for explicit images. In a statement, the corporation said it was asked to do so by police, who are looking into the matter. And that is all for this lunchtime. The latest with yours next. The evening news is at 6:30, but from everyone here, bye-bye.